I decided to make a commentary for this video because trying to describe everything manually would be extremely difficult. A lot of nuances came up during the work, which I'll describe. I dislike pine due to the sheer amount of resin inside the wood. When you turn pine, not only do your tools, lathe, and all your clothes get gummy, but also your face, shield, and the camera lens. Cleaning all that afterward is an extremely lengthy and unpleasant process. That's why I try to avoid turning pine whenever possible. I have a buddy who occasionally brings me various pine burls, and in order to not toss them, I have to make something with them. That was the case this time too, but in the end, I was for the first time glad I messed with pine. Pine wood, after it's been turned, is very sticky because of the huge amount of resin remaining in it. If you don't seal the grain with something, dust, grime, and fingerprints will remain on it. I make a note in every one of my videos that I have a dust allergy, and that's why I'm forced to work in gloves. So when you touch the finished piece with gloves, their smudges immediately appear on the surface. In these shots, you can clearly see how the resin got onto the lens, and everything looks as if it's in a fog. And right here, it's very clearly shown how the resin is oozing profusely onto the blade. To seal the wood and prevent the resin from leaching out, I decided to apply several coats of shellac. However, after a day had passed, I saw that firstly, there were imperfections on the surface, and secondly, the resin was still leaching out. Therefore, I decided to change strategy and reshape the bowl from scratch. It should also be noted that I constantly had to resharpen the blades. At one point here, I even realized that the blade geometry was off, and I had to re-grind it from scratch. If you want to avoid torn grain, in my subjective opinion, the 4040 ball gouge is the best blade for this job. It practically leaves no torn fibers. The grain pattern of the resulting bowl was so beautiful that I didn't regret taking on this burl, and despite the resin and all the difficulties associated with it, it was truly worth it. All the areas with resinous fibers were a bright amber color, and the wood itself, shimmering in the light, resembled mother of pearl. I would now describe what I saw as amber in Nacre. No camera, not even the most expensive lens, can convey the real beauty of the finished bowl. As for the scraper, I had to resharpen it, if not after every pass, then literally after every few passes. This was true even though it was pine. Ultimately, this brought results. If you don't press down on the blade and instead try to move across the surface as smoothly and without stopping as possible, the torn grain gradually disappears and the wood becomes clean, almost perfect. You must try to take off a minimal amount of wood with each pass. To eliminate the lines and imperfections, I had to work with the scraper for a very long time. While working, it often happened that the fibers would lift slightly in one direction, so I had to make a pass with the scraper in the opposite direction. After a long period of corrections, I finally managed to achieve a very good result. It turned out that on the wide section of the bowl, the correct movement was left to right, while on the narrow section, which was closer to the chuck, the ideal movement was the reverse, right to left. To avoid overloading your attention with the same process, I included approximately 30% of the actual time this all took. This time, I decided to apply polyurethane lacquer, and this idea turned out to be a great success. The luster of the piece remained, and the resin leakage stopped. The varnish dries quickly, and even if any drops remain, they don't turn into smudges later. When I realized I was going to do this project, I immediately set the goal to avoid sanding. When you sand, the wood heats up and the resin quickly starts clogging the grit of the sandpaper. A brand new sheet of sandpaper immediately turns into trash that you have to throw out almost immediately. Also, the sandpaper leaves dirty smudges and streaks on the surface. That's why it was important to cut with the gouges well enough to eliminate sanding as much as possible. Here I specifically took a small piece of scrap sandpaper and demonstrated just how quickly it gets clogged. The rim of the bowl had several areas with bark remnants and sections of plain wood that showed bluing and completely lacked the pattern characteristic of a barrel. Therefore, I had to cut off about 1 centimeter. Before applying the varnish to the inside of the bowl, I had to blow everything out with an air compressor. Since neither a brush nor any other bristles could completely remove the dust and shavings, the final result was excellent.